Study Section 1. Political Philosophers. Introduction. Political philosophy has been a branch of philosophy over so many centuries. It started in ancient Greece, and the first major publication in that genre of philosophy is Plato's Republic. Political philosophy can also be defined as a branch of philosophy with a normative discipline in the sense that it deals with ideal situations rather than raw facts. Political philosophers are a group of philosophers that are specialized in the field of philosophy. In this study session, you will learn about political philosophy, Plato's concepts, the link between the concept of justice and the guidance, and the Aristotle's typology of government. Learning outcomes for study section 1. After you have studied this study section, you should be able to explain the term political philosopher, state Plato's concept of the guardian, discuss Aristotle's typology of government. Political philosophy. Political philosophy has been a branch of philosophy over so many centuries. It started in ancient Greece, and the first major publication in that genre of philosophy is Plato's Republic. You have also other philosophers in ancient Greece like Aristotle, who wrote Politics. Political philosophy as a branch of philosophy is a normative discipline in the sense that it deals with ideal situations rather than raw facts. If one looks at what political philosophers have done, it will be discovered that most of their works have prescribed an ideal social order. What this means is that what ought to be rather than what is the case. In the works of Plato, Aristotle, Machiavelli, and others, what these political philosophers have done or theorized is simply a social order which they feel will bring about a well-ordered society or community, as the case may be. This is why political philosophy differs from social sciences, especially political science, which is nearer to it. Social scientists investigate factual social orders, that is, they look at the existing social order, and in doing that, they theorize or propose a theory in a generalized form. What they do is to look at certain instances and propose a theory that will cover other instances in a similar situation or scenario that might occur in future. That can be defined as a branch of philosophy is a normative discipline in the sense that it deals with ideal situations rather than raw facts. A. Political sociology. B. Political geographer. C. Political scientist. D. Political philosopher. The answer is D. Political philosopher. Social science is therefore not a discipline that engages in normative judgment as in political philosophy. However, there is no rigid demarcation between political philosophy and social science because both of them deal with existing social systems, and from these social orders, they abstract from them and propose a theory that will deal with a similar situation in future. Another basic difference that can be noticed is that political philosophy deals with conceptual analysis. In this engagement of conceptual analysis, what political philosophers do is to analyze concepts, that is, they break down certain concepts of political terms. These concepts include justice, democracy, socialism, authoritarianism. If you look at the works of political philosophers from the ancient times to contemporary times, one would notice that conceptual analysis has featured prominently in their works. In a nutshell, political philosophy is a discipline or a branch that is normative, as earlier pointed out, and this is what makes it quite different from disciplines that are factual in orientation. In political philosophy, you ask certain questions. Who should rule? When is a government legitimate or not legitimate? What is authority? What is power? What is force? These are questions that are grappled with in political philosophy. Political philosophers have grappled with these questions and theorized about them. If one looks at the works of Plato, Aristotle, Machiavelli, Aquinas, Augustine, Hobbes, Locke, Russell, down to the present philosophers like Rawls, they have all grappled with questions of social orders in the society. In what ways did political philosophers prescribe social order which they believe would be suitable for the citizens in that society from a normative angle? Plato's concept of the guardian. He was a philosopher in the ancient Greek city of Athens. He was a student of Socrates, and the ideas of Socrates had tremendous influence on him. In fact, many people or philosophers believe that it is difficult to demarcate Socrates' political ideas from Plato's. All his philosophical writings are couched in a dialogical form. His writings have Socrates as the main speaker in all these dialogues. In his main book on politics, entitled The Republic, he sets all his ideas on how society should be run from a normative point of view. He believed that in a well-ordered society, certain set of people should rule who he called the guardians. He believed the guardians would have gone through certain training which would have prepared them to be ready to take up the leadership of the state or society. In fact, the guardians are chosen on merit since there are certain set of examinations which they would have gone through. Plato's main concept of the guardian. Plato believed that the guardians would have been taught mathematics, music, gymnastics, or physical training as the case may be. Before anybody can become a guardian, he must pass these trainings, which are rigorous. At the end of the training, over some period, those who are fit would have emerged from those rigorous trainings. He claimed that the guardians would have imbibed the form of justice which would help them to rule properly in the state. The theory of form in Plato's political ideas is enormously important. It is, in fact, the foundation on which all his other ideas are grounded, or it is like a foundation on which all his other ideas are erected. Plato believed that all states should be placed on the idea of justice because if you have a just state, the state will be well ordered. He believed that each individual has an ability to do certain jobs, and in view of this, he believed that by the training of the guardians or what they have gone through in terms of training, they will be able to rule properly, and as earlier hinted, they will be able to comprehend the form of justice, and if this is the case, they will rule justly in the state. Plato's Republic is a sort of blueprint for an ideal society, and he aims at a well-ordered and just society where everybody has a job that is suitable for him in the state. His republic has been criticized on many fronts from both the left and the right, liberals and Marxists or radicals. From the liberals' point of view, they have termed his republic as a closed society in the sense that Plato has given us a society that denies freedom to the society as well as being not democratic, that is, no freedom of choice, a structured society with no alternative. Moreover, it has been alleged that his republic is utopian in nature. From the radical point of view, Plato's republic is a class-structured society because in that society, you have those who are rulers and those who are simply to be ruled. The guardians have been programmed to rule, and the auxiliary class, as well as the slaves and the women, are simply there as onlookers who cannot partake in the public sphere or hold any public office. It is also hierarchical in nature. Aristotle typology of government. Aristotle could be described as the father of political science. His political ideas are colored with empirical concepts. He was a scientific genius, and this left a mark on his political writings. He could, as earlier adverted to, well be described as the father of empirical political science because his work in politics was based on actual study of societies. Aristotle did not fly into speculative idealism, as you have in Plato, but remained in the terra firma of concrete existence in his discussion of politics. It is a sort of dialogic conversation with Plato, yet his conclusion is Platonic. Aristotle is opposed to Plato's theory of form and instead believes that forms exist in particulars. In fact, they are concrete objects. He has a teleological view of things of the world, that is, all things in the world are to be understood in terms of the ends toward which they tend to achieve. His works are immensely influenced by science, for he was a scientist of the first order. One cannot understand Aristotle's political ideas without first understanding his ethical ideas, for both are closely related. The ethical thrust of Aristotle is directed at virtue, arete, and happiness, eudaimonia. The word arete normally refers to excellence or happiness. Aristotle's definition of human excellence. Aristotle refers to human excellence or good as what human beings strive to achieve. Happiness is the final goal of man, and he desires other things for the sake of happiness of goodness. And what is happiness for man? It contains that it is the essential nature in a life lived intelligently and wisely. The end of man is that he lives an integrated, complete life, just as the end or telos or goal of the acorn is that it becomes an oak tree. In this way, the potentialities become actualized and the essential nature is fulfilled. Dash refers to human excellence as what human beings strive to achieve. A. Plato. B. Aristotle. C. Henry Ford. D. Charles Babbage. B. Aristotle. The virtue or excellence of anything is that the full flowering of the potentialities of the essential nature of form. Man is essentially a rational animal. The good, then, for man is the activity of his human nature, which should be in accordance with the right reason and accompanied by right reason. The good for man is that he should be a rational animal. The end of man is to be found in his form, which is the soul. This form has various powers or faculties. What distinguishes man from other things is reason. The good man lies in activity that is in accordance with reason, which is his entire nature. It is through the activity of reason that his entire nature, that his entire is revealed, and thus can man be seen at his human best. The striving to be human, that is, to be rational, is habitual. Goodness of character and disposition is developed only through constant repetition of good acts. In this manner, good habits are acquired. Good habits of virtue give rise to a good disposition, thus the importance of virtuous education in childhood and adolescence. Now, to act in accordance with reason, to be virtuous generally, involves a choosing of a certain mean between extremes of conduct. Thus, for example, courage is a mean between rashness, a vice of excess, and cowardice, a vice of defect. The doctrine of the mean, then, is like a scale between extremes of doing things. It is, in fact, an intermediate between extremes of virtue and vice, though it is not like arithmetic. You must constantly take all the individual cases into account and strike a balance. It therefore follows that to find the mean is a complex and difficult task. Virtue or excellence constantly involves acting rightly in relation to time, manner, motives, objects, and people, and it involves finding the proper mean. Some actions are intrinsically bad, such as hatred and murder, and in these cases, the doctrine of the mean does not apply. In fact, there is no way one can apply the doctrine in these cases because the virtuous mean is excellence. It is not an aberration, neither is it mediocrity. Although the doctrine of the mean applies to most human behavior, feels it does not apply to the virtue of justice. Hence, it is not in all cases that virtue is doing things in accordance with the doctrine of the mean. The Aristotelian conception of justice is different from the Platonic one, in that, in the latter case, justice is particularized. It is used for distributive and rectificatory justice and applies also to political justice and shows the difference between natural and merely conventional justice. Distributive justice is a proportional relation between persons or goods. Rectificatory justice involves righting of wrongs, while political justice involves the equity of justice. Ethics. The Ethics is a treatise or portrait of the good and happy man and is premised on virtue and happiness. And these two relate to how men should live together in society. This logically leads to his political ideas, which are articulated in Politics. He believes that men are not isolated individuals and that virtue cannot be practiced by solitary hermits. Man, Aristotle contends, is by nature a social animal. Men have a common activity peculiar to them. They can perceive the good and the bad, the just and the unjust, and it is partnership which makes this perception possible, and these things can only be realized in a state. Society and state are not artificial but natural to man. In fact, they are manifestations of human nature. Aristotle argues that every state is a partnership, and it is through it that man can attain physical, moral, and intellectual perfection. It is for this reason that he places utmost importance on the state. He contends that the state exists to provide the bare necessities of life. The state is not an alliance because it has a moral aim, that is to ensure the good of the community as a whole, whereas an alliance exists for mutual protection. It differs from a nation in that the state is a well-knitted political association, whereas a nation is a large amorphous entity. A state is not an aggregate collection of individuals. It is a community under a single constitution and law. The state is united not necessarily because of its location and size, but rather because of its constitution. The state evolves through a whole complex of development. Family household, which evolve into a village, and family villages into a state. A state, Aristotle believes, must be self-sufficient in order to provide the bare necessities of life. Aristotle romanticizes the state so much that he hails the unknown lawgiver who founded the first state as one of a man's great benefactors. In a state, citizenship is not exercised in a vacuum but in a particular type of state, and there are many types of states or governments. There is, for example, the Spartan state, which is inclined towards conducting wars. There is this Cretan state, established in the interest of the rich, and the Carthaginian state, which relies on a policy of emigration to keep down insurrection. Aristotle believed that citizens of the state should participate in its political and judicial affairs. Each citizen will be a member of the assembly or deliberative body and will be eligible for any office of the state. The type of political power that exists in the state depends on the constitution. Aristotle produces taxonomy of constitutions. The three main types of political power, which are monarchy, aristocracy, democracy. The corresponding states are tyranny, oligarchy, and radical democracy, or mob rule. In certain circumstances, Aristotle favors monarchy if it is in the interest of all, while in other circumstances he is for democracy where a constitution is operative in the state. In a democratic setup, offices rotate frequently and there is a wide participation in government by the citizens. However, citizenship does not include slaves as well as servants, manual workers, or artisans. The goal of the state or government, as I have intimated, is the general happiness of the citizens. This, Aristotle argues, can be achieved only through the practical wisdom of the sound statesman. Those statesmen who are responsible apply their knowledge of good principles, common sense, and sound judgment to solve specific problems. The Platonic element in Aristotle could be gleaned from the fact that he believes that the most satisfying life is that which combines wisdom to practical political problems. Aristotle contends that the good of political power can never be the highest good because political activity is a degrading activity. The statesman can only develop his capacities through the guidance of right reason, which can lead to the attainment of the philosophical ideal of wisdom. The business of lawmaking should be left to the leisured class, which has the time to contemplate because the class has wisdom. The other citizens have to be educated by the legislative body in the spirit of the Constitution. Aristotle argues that citizenship is a lifetime affair. Citizens devote all their lives to the service of the state. At a young age, they are soldiers, and when they are in the middle age, they are assembly members and jurymen, and when old, they are priests of the state. Aristotle contends that when the individuals attain their proper end as moral human beings, the state would prosper. As I have said earlier, the state exists for man and not vice versa. In fact, it exists for the moral aim, that is, it aims at moral goodness. The basic focus, therefore, of politics is that the state exists for the happiness of its citizens. There is no doubt that Aristotle's political ideas are grounded in historical experience. He did not fly into the speculative terrain as you saw in Plato, but remained here on earth. Yet, his theory in the last instance comes close to that of Plato in his belief that it is only those who have attained philosophical wisdom who can give a proper direction to the state. He was also much a child of his age. He looked at the ancient Greek states and the surrounding states to postulate his types of government, and this influenced him considerably. He could not go beyond his age. He oscillates between the democratic institution and aristocratic one, and on some occasions gives the impression that the democratic institution is not good because it can lead to mob rule. In this, he shows the aristocratic streak in him. He places much emphasis on the moral virtue of the citizens. As Lyot has pointed out, he believes that the stability of the state depends much on the character of the citizens than on constitutional or economic factors. Yet, you know that moral character is not enough. The constitutional and economic factors are also important in the stability of any state, and economic factors can either lead to the satisfaction of the citizens or to downright unsatisfactory conditions, which can lead to a revolution. Aristotle too was aware of this fact. Aristotle, like Plato, also believes in a class society and this belief leads him to believe that only a certain class can rule those who have attained wisdom, the so-called leisured class. One cannot but conclude from this last point that though it differs from Plato in many points, it returns to the old idea of philosopher-king. However, there are positive aspects in his political theory. He believes that the state exists for the good and happy life of its citizens. Further, the state should promote the common interest of the whole populace, though this conflicts with his class-structured conception of society, for if the state has classes, it will be difficult for this common interest to be protected. But the chief merit, as Lyot has rightly pointed out, is that he gave politics a new dimension by grounding it on empirical study, so he could be rightly called the father of political science. He refers to concrete examples to illustrate what could bring about stability and instability. And his classification of states is firmly rooted in an empirical study of the states of his days. Summary for Studies Section 1. In this Studies Section 1, you have learned that 1. Political philosophy has been a branch of philosophy over so many centuries. It started in ancient Greece, and the first major publication in that genre of philosophy is Plato's Republic. You have also other philosophers in ancient Greece like Aristotle, who wrote Politics. Political philosophy as a branch of philosophy is a normative discipline in the sense that it deals with ideal situations rather than raw facts. 2. Plato was a philosopher in the ancient Greek city of Athens. He was a student of Socrates, and the ideas of Socrates had tremendous influence on him. In fact, many people of philosophers believe that it is difficult to demarcate Socrates' political ideas from Plato's. All his philosophical writings are couched in a dialogical form. 3. Aristotle is opposed to Plato's theory of form and instead believes that forms exist in particulars. In fact, they are concrete objects. He has a theological view of things, of the world, that is, all things in the world are to be understood in terms of the ends towards which they tend to achieve. 4. The Ethics is a treatise or portrait of the good and happy man and is premised on virtue and happiness, and these two relate to how men should live together in society. This logically leads to his political ideas, which are articulated in Politics. This is the end of Studies Section 1. Thanks for listening.